One of the most exciting aspects of writing and even reading fiction is the world in which the characters live. Is it a world where the only response to the insanity, chaos, and evil is to dress up like a bat and fight crime? Is it a world where mammoth kaiju duke it out for the supremacy of ruling the planet? Or is it a galaxy far, far away where the only hope is a farm boy radicalized against his father's tyrannical government by a space wizard? We're going to be looking at how to take familiar elements and transform them into an imaginative new experience. I'm your host, Garrett K. Jones, and we are continuing our Season 5 deep dive into exploring elements of world building. Welcome back to The Right Way. We have a great episode in store for you with this week's content. But before we jump into this month's writing tip, there are a couple of announcements. First, we are now 4 weeks past Author Awareness April. If you didn't get a chance to check out that playlist and that marathon, you can actually do so by clicking the card that's popping up right above my head right now. You can also find a link to last Saturday's live stream on Instagram by going to the video description and clicking on that link. As we are getting ready to jump into the summer months, I wanted to let you know that there are just a handful of episodes, 7 in fact, before Season 5 comes to a conclusion. And of those 7, here's what we have coming up. And these aren't even including the live streams. We have 3 coming up in June and 4 episodes in July, with the season finale landing on July 29th. And starting next week, in preparation for the 6th season, I will open up the signups for author awareness interviews so that authors wanting to promote their work will be able to do so. There are some cool things that I would like to put in place for Season 6, so fingers crossed I'll be able to do exactly that. However, your support and your help would be appreciated, whether it is going to be through Patreon or by picking up some of the really neat merch that I have on my shop on Teespring. Links for both are in the video description. So world building is one of the most crucial aspects of writing. We're going to continue looking at Ellen Brock's world building Bible templates and applying it through the lens of Avatar: The Last Airbender. In March, we examine what the Avatar's world looks like by exploring law and politics. This month, we are tackling 3 more categories from the 21 that Brock listed. Today, we are going to be covering magic, technology, and religion. Let's dive in, shall we? I want to tackle these in the following order: religion, tech, and magic. There's a reason for this that I'll come back to, but for now, let's focus on religion. In Brock's template, she gives 8 bullet points to focus on when we are developing the religion or religions within our own stories. Those bullet points include major religions, dynamics between religious groups, places of worship, religious holidays, morals and beliefs, origin of religion, prevalence and separation or lack thereof between religion and government. In Avatar, we see religious elements, but they aren't explored in great detail. The biggest religious element is the belief in the Avatar him or herself. The Avatar serves as a religious figure of sorts without actually being worshipped as a god. There is also spiritual animism, as seen in Shintoism, as well as inclusions of Hindu and Buddhist elements, but that seems to carry across all the cultures in the show. There are no religious groups, unless you count the monastic air nomads or the fire sages, and you don't really see any religious leaders in the water tribes or the earth kingdom. There are, however, plenty of places to worship, such as the shrine on Roku's Island, the shrine on Kyoshi Island, or any of the other shrines established in honor of the Avatar. We also don't get to see much in the way of religious festivals, with one notable exception, and that is Avatar Day in Chin Village, in which the villagers burn effigies of previous and current avatars because Kyoshi ended their founder, Chin the Conqueror. It's not until Legend of Korra that we see harmonic convergence being celebrated in the way that it is in that series. Most of the morals and beliefs focus on doing good and receiving good in return, a Buddhist understanding of karma. Aang was taught to value all life as sacred, so he didn't appreciate taking the life of anyone. He took this version of the atavistic religion to an extreme by not even killing his enemies. He wouldn't even eat meat because it had been an animal, so in his final showdown with Ozai, he never compromised his personal values. We don't really get to see the origin of the Avatar religion until Season 2 of The Legend of Korra, when we are introduced to Wan, the first Avatar who carried the spirit of Rava, so they could be bonded in body and spirit, and its prevalence is worldwide, though many people lose faith in the Avatar because of Aang's century-long absence during the war with the Fire Nation. The use of religion is only loosely explored, so that leads us into the first writing tip for the month. Tip number 1, decide in advance how much religion will play a factor in your world building. Will it be all-encompassing like an Avatar, or will it be more specific to certain parts of the storytelling? If you are going to develop religion, look at currently existing religions and use Brock's bullet points to highlight those tenets that stand out. Now let's move on to technology. Technology can be as simple or as complex as you make it. If you're doing something like historic fiction or medieval fantasy, it's easier to lean towards the simple or basic technology. For example, I have a huge tower in my book series that has a dais that works like a massive maglev elevator, like those seen in the Halo franchise. It works because of a principle of magic, but we'll get into magic a little bit later. Brock provides 6 bullet points: availability, capability, weapons technology, entertainment, energy creation, and transportation technology. Most of the tech in Avatar is medieval based, using wagons, carts, and the like, as well as spears and other melee and ranged weapons of the time. The availability of this medieval style of tech is fairly widespread, and the capabilities are fairly basic. It doesn't require a whole lot of processing power to understand what the tech does or how it works. However, it's the Fire Nation that uses more industrial forms of tech, like their steamer ships, their tanks, their land transports, and eventually their war balloons. When it comes to weapons and transportation tech, the Fire Nation is streets ahead. That is partly because of the work done by the Mechanist introduced in Season 1, but war is usually a time when we see huge leaps in innovation for weapons and transportation technology to begin with. The Fire Nation still uses firebending as their ultimate weapon, but they also have armored vessels that are harder to sink or destroy. One of the biggest weapons that they developed was the drill used to try and bore through the outer wall of Ba Sing Se. But it's also during this time that the Mechanist and Sokka developed the world's first submarines and their scuba systems. The world of Avatar doesn't see any huge leaps in entertainment technology until Legend of Korra, when we see shadow puppet theater giving way to moving pictures, given LOK's turn of the century roaring 20s inspired time period. So here is writing tip number 2. Pay attention to the time period in which you are setting your story to ensure your technology fits in that era. Now, if you're writing historical fiction, it would be anachronistic to have any kind of digital technology unless the explanation is related to time travel or aliens or something along those lines. A great example of this is the movie Prey, which is a Predator prequel from 2022 set in the late 16th century. The Yautja shows up in the Great Plains and interacts with members of a local Comanche tribe. Its ghost-like cloaking device and its other weaponry gives it a demonic strength and visage and makes it resemble a creature from Comanche folklore. And the weapons it pulls, seemingly from the air, give it an almost supernatural element, almost as if by magic. But as Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that brings us to our third and final category for this month's segment. Brock gives us 12 bullet points to focus on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to condense them down into 6, which are common and rare spells and their restrictions, common and rare magical skills and their restrictions, common and rare potions and their restrictions, prevalence of magic users, society's perception of magic, and requirements of using magic. In the world of Avatar, magic is all around, with various people bending the 4 elements. Almost all air nomads were airbenders, but the extermination whittled that number down to a single person. There are thousands of earth and firebenders and maybe a few thousand waterbenders, but there are some rarities. There are no metal benders until Toph creates the skill, and lightning bending was only taught to members of the Fire Nation royal family. But there were restrictions on the skill of things like bloodbending because of its abusive power. And only the Avatar developed the skill and the ability to bend a person's chi to take away or restore bending. There are no inclusions of potions, though there is a heavy metal poison given to Korra by the Red Lotus to trigger the Avatar state and kill her to end the cycle. But there are restrictions on who can bend. The Fire Nation made it illegal for earthbenders to practice their skills, especially near the colonies in the outer fringes of the Earth Kingdom. Many were locked away on a converted coal refinery rig on the coast where they had no access to Earth until Katara reminded them that coal is part of the Earth. And the Northern Water Tribe prevented women and girls from practicing true waterbending, requiring benders to learn healing instead. There is also a disparity between benders and non-benders to the point where there is a non-bending, anti-bending revolution where the non-benders begin to hate on those who can control the elements, who had been the predominant demographic of the world. This revolution was intended to demonize benders and, under the leadership of a closeted bender named Amon, stripped benders of their powers. But bending is used in conjunction with technology. Sokka's subs relied on waterbending to submerge and surface and move through the water. And by Legend of Korra, lightning bending was more widely taught and used to power electrical plants for Republic City. Metal bending was incorporated into law enforcement technology. But something to consider as a rule, and this brings us to writing tip number 3. How does magic help or hinder technology in your world? While the various bending styles become a boon to the growth and innovation of technology in Avatar, magical or mythical creatures hinder that development. Just look at Game of Thrones, for example. Westeros and Essos were stuck in medieval technologies because dragons prevented those regions from truly developing. When the most powerful weapons and transportation tech is a living, fire-breathing beast of legend, good luck thriving in your innovations, because it's clear when Daenerys loses it, there is no actual defense against dragonfire. No armor or defensive fortifications are going to be enough to hold up against the menace of a dragon or an undead army of ice zombies who also had a resurrected zombified dragon on their side. Yikes. Last tip to consider when developing your magical system, if you have one. And this will be tip number 4. Decide in advance whether or not you're going to have a hard magic system or a soft magic system. If you want to know the difference, let's take a look at Dungeons & Dragons versus Star Wars. D&D has a hard system. There are strict rules that characters must follow in order for magic to be used. And the constant use of magic in Dungeons & Dragons wears a user down as if they're physically exerting themselves. Now, while that exertion happens with Force users in Star Wars, there's really no consistency among the various media of the saga of what powers a Jedi or Sith can do. Super jumping, extra speed, telekinesis, telepathy, and some level of cosmic awareness are the most often seen, but then you get to the sequel trilogy, episodes 7 through 9, and you see crazy things like stopping blaster bolts in midair. Vader blocked them with his hand in episode 5, but Kylo Ren and Disney take these skills to a completely different level. And then there's Ren's and Rey's dyad connection, allowing them to transport objects across space and time, which is unheard of, as if the writers didn't understand the material and just made up the rules as they went.
That's not how the Force works.
You can blend a hard and soft magic system, but you also need to be consistent, and that's really the tip for this point. So that's it. Tip number 1, decide in advance how much religion will play a factor in your world building. Tip number 2, pay attention to the time period in which you are setting your story to ensure that your technology fits in that era. Tip number 3, decide in advance how magic helps or hinders the technology in your world. Lastly, tip number 4, decide in advance whether you're going to have a hard magic system or a soft magic system, or both. Follow these tips and you will have an easier time developing the world that your story inhabits. Hey, thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications on new videos. You can support the channel on Patreon and the merch store. Those links can be found down in the video description. If there's anything that you have questions about, please make sure to leave them in the comment section. I would love to respond to those. And make sure to tune in next week for the June top 10 list. See you then.